You are listening to Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZWLP Conroe and 106.1 KZCCLP Conroe and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Hi, welcome to the Legal Connection Show. My name is Tony Collins. I'm an attorney in Texas. My co-host Christine is not here with us today, but she should be back next week. We are a legal show that helps the local community with updating, with legal questions and updates in the law and what have you. We are on between 12 and 1 every Tuesday, and you can get us or listen to our show on FM 104.5 and FM 106.1 locally on the FM band. You can also listen to us on our Facebook page, which is the Legal Connection Show on Facebook. And we also have, it's replayed on YouTube. So, and you can just Google the Legal Connection Show. And finally, irlonestar.com, the radio station, carries all of our episodes if you want to go back and listen to this later. Okay, so today we're going to go over the legislative updates, new laws for the state and for the federal government. There are two different areas of law, and the state, of course, passes the state laws, and the federal government is broadly covers that umbrella of the Texas and other states. And we're also going to go over a little bit about what we went over 2 weeks ago, which was the new constitutional carry law that will come into effect on September 1st in Texas. Just to explain a little bit about how the new gun law will change what the laws are now. I should be, completely open disclosure here. I don't own a gun, but my husband owns guns. Many of my friends own guns, and I've represented a number of clients who own guns. So this is going to be sort of news to me, but may help you if you have a gun, and if you're interested in acquiring a gun, and kind of where you sit in Texas and in other states, if they've got reciprocity and that kind of thing. All right, so let's get started, and I'm going to explain how constitutional carry will change the gun laws in Texas. Texans 21 years old or older will no longer need to get a license to carry a pistol. All right. On June 16th, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed House Bill 1927, allowing constitutional carry to take effect on September 1st of this year. And so here's sort of the backstory on that. After years of balking at what some Second Amendment advocates call the holy grail of gun laws, Republicans in the Texas legislature this year passed a bill to allow Texans to carry pistols without a license. And as you probably know from my other shows, you can still carry rifles in Texas without a license, and you can open carry them. But you also set yourself up for getting in trouble with the law and other people, and maybe people wanting to protect themselves and their property, because people don't generally walk around with a rifle at their hip. But so you have to kind of use some common sense about that. So this bill is known by supporters as the constitutional carry House Bill 1927, and it allows Texans 21 and over to carry handguns openly or concealed without obtaining a state-issued license, so long they are not excluded from possessing a firearm by another federal or state law. So it's limited just like it is right now. You can't just carry one if you're not allowed to carry one now because perhaps you're a felon or you have a family violence issue, or maybe you're not psychologically able to carry one, whatever the case may be. If you're not allowed by a federal or state law to carry one, you can't carry one under this new law. Previously, Texans who wanted to carry a pistol needed a state-issued license that required training, a proficiency exam, and a background check. So if you went to an auction and bought a gun, you might have the gun, but you wouldn't be allowed to carry it anywhere because there are certain prohibitions requiring, certain things to happen prior to that. Okay, so Governor Abbott signed the bill into law on June 16th. and the law will go into effect on September 1st, as we stated earlier. Supporters of the law argue the change would restore Second Amendment rights, removing virtually all government barriers to carrying a handgun in many public places. House Bill 1927 seeks to reduce barriers to the free exercise of Texans' constitutional right to bear arms and defend their lives and property by making it legal for individuals who are 21 years of age or older and who can legally possess a firearm to carry a handgun without first obtaining a license. And that's a quote from an analysis of the bill from the Senate Research Center. Opponents say it would remove barriers aimed at keeping people who are not legally fit to possess a gun from carrying one. They also say it would increase gun violence and escalate conflict in public places, which is true. If you've got a firearm and you're basically showing somebody something and you're speaking in a threatening manner, you're kind of setting yourself up to be arrested or also get shot. So you have to be very reasonable about this. But for typical law-abiding citizens that want to exercise their Second Amendment rights, there's simply no reason that you can't have it in your purse if you're a woman for protection, or you just carrying it because you feel like you may need it to protect somebody. If you're going into, a commercial establishment that allows that. Now, police unions from major Texas cities and some handgun instructors opposed the original bill this year, saying it would make it more difficult for police to identify suspects from bystanders during an active crime scene, which is absolutely true and a big reason why it didn't pass previously. They say that it will impact Texas and what the limitations are. Here is what the bill changes. Currently, Texans have to obtain a license to carry a handgun, either openly or concealed. So as we speak today, you still need to get a license to carry, okay? The license requires up to 6 hours of training, a written exam, and a shooting proficiency exam. Prospective licensees also currently have to submit their fingerprints and pass a background check to obtain the permit. All things that are completely logical, and I'd want that in place if my, some crazy neighbors or relatives or somebody that doesn't like me very much wanted to carry a gun. I'd hope they'd have to go through this. Under the new law, Texans will no longer need the licensing to carry a handgun. A background check is still required to purchase the firearm. So when you go to that auction or you go to Best Buy or a hunting goods store or whoever sells guns, and I'm not even sure if Best Buy does, they might. Do you know that, Station Manager Dick, if Best Buy sells guns? They don't sell guns, or you don't know? Oh, they don't. Okay. I've never seen the gun area of Best Buy, but they sell everything else there. They sell Viking gas ranges. Our gas range, the lights went out, and my beloved husband blew a fuse, and that, 2000, it's a $10,000 range now needs to be worked on. Apparently, Best Buy sells these really expensive ranges, and they sell theater systems and all kind of other things, but not guns. So I guess you got to limit yourself to Dick's Sporting Goods and the like. So a background check is still necessary if wherever you purchase that gun. This is a simple restoration of Texans' constitutional right under the Second Amendment, a right of the people to keep and bear arms, and this is according to the senator that sponsored the legislation, Charles Schwertner, of a Republican from Georgetown. Handguns were the only type of firearm that required a state license to carry in most public places in Texas. Long guns, like shotguns and rifles, including semi-automatic rifles, were and still are allowed to be openly carried in most public places in Texas without a license, which is insane. You can carry a semi-automatic rifle into a public place, a park or what have you, without a license, which would scare the heebie-jeebs out of anybody that's just sitting there with their family. So I would still think that you'd need to use your better judgment before carrying your long arm rifle or semi-automatic rifle on into a park or the like. Now, obtaining a firearms license still has its advantages. A handgun license will allow the carrier to have reciprocity in other states that have enacted that kind of open gun type carry legislation. A license is also considered a valid form of ID when casting a ballot and grants expedited access into the Texas Capitol, which I didn't know. And if you've ever seen a Texas license to carry, it looks just like a driver's license. It is the same small, it's got your picture on it, but for the wording saying what the license is for, it looks identical. And so if you're sort of like me and you want to preserve your youth for future pictures of your license, this would be another form that you could go get your picture taken and have it to represent your youth from 20 years past without having to get your picture taken over and over again. So in other words, when you're 80, you could have your 50-year-old picture in it as long as they didn't require you to go in and take another one. All right, so where you still cannot carry, and this is important, there are certain public places firearms are not allowed, even under constitutional carry, unless you are a licensed peace officer. These are the places that you still cannot carry whether you have a license or not, okay? Bars and other businesses that make 51% of the receipts from alcohol. So don't be going to that restaurant over on Washington Avenue in Houston, like the Handlebar, and think that you can be carrying your pistol with you because it's not allowed. But you can take it into a restaurant like Papacitos because their primary sales are not liquor. It is for dinner. They just happen to also have a bar that sells liquor. All right. So schools, very important. You can't bring that firearm when you're going in to talk to your kid's teacher, or or any school for that matter. Don't go in there because you have a conflict with maybe one of the people there, or you're afraid for your child because you've had some kind of issues with your child being arrested, or and I've represented lots of juveniles that have gotten in trouble that not necessarily in the lunchroom, but after school. But kids these days can be pretty violent. There's a lot of in the schools that don't have great reputations. There's a lot of activity where I've represented juveniles that have defended themselves and ended up with a juvenile record for shooting at people and cars outside their houses. So don't think that age is a prohibition to somebody not having a firearm. Kids will illegally possess those even when they're not supposed to have them. And in their house, they're going to grab their parents, which I represented another client whose kid accessed their firearm in their closet. Kids observe everything. The firearm was tucked away and supposed to be hidden. And this child went up into his mother's Red Oak Ranch bedroom and got the gun and took a loaded gun to school. Charges were pressed against her. It hurt her custody battle. The kid was just, in my opinion, just a little brat, a self-entitled brat. The 7-year-old knew exactly what he was doing. He's very smart for his age. And he took this loaded gun to school. So parents, please lock your guns up. You may think that you need them if you're going to be broken into, but have the key handy where only you know where it is, or a combination, because your kids may take it upon themselves to go get those guns. And you will get in trouble, and it's really, really difficult. You got to hire an attorney if you're in a custody battle, which is a lot of times when this happens because the kids are acting out, or maybe the other parent is trying to set it up so that they get the parent in trouble that they don't want to live with because that's the disciplinary parent. So for whatever reason, your gun may not be locked up, or you think you've got it hidden away. Make sure you've locked it away because your kids can access it, which can always be dangerous. So anyway, schools, prohibited place. You can't carry a handgun there. Sporting events and horse or dog races. Can't bring your gun to the football game or to the horse races. Just don't do it. I guess that would also include in Conroe if you had chicken fights, but I think that chicken fights are not legal, so you couldn't bring it to that either. Anyway, polling places. Don't bring your gun when you're going to go vote, even though you can use it to identify yourself when you go vote. Don't bring your gun with you. Airports, don't even think about it. Don't bring your gun to an airport. You're just asking for trouble. They're going to confiscate it. You won't get it back. And I believe that's a federal aviation commission law, or maybe just a federal law. I don't know what the actual one is. We're going to get into the federal laws later. And there are some new gun laws that have been enacted by the federal government. Courtrooms. Do not bring the gun into a courtroom under any circumstances. You're just, once again, they're going to go through a metal detector. They're just going to confiscate it, and you probably won't get it back because that is a law. I don't think ignorance of the law is going to be a defense for you. And I know in Montgomery County, they like to keep your guns. Whenever they take your gun in the commission of a crime that you are ultimately exonerated from, they still ask you during the plea bargain that they will, if they can dismiss the case in return for keeping the gun. So just don't bring your gun into a courtroom. Government buildings, also off limits. Hospitals. Don't bring your gun into a hospital. I'm not sure why you'd need a gun in a hospital, but don't do it. Federal property and national park buildings that include the San Antonio Missions and the Alamo. You would think you could bring a gun in there since it's just a church building, but no, you cannot bring it into national park buildings or federal property. Private businesses are land in which the owner has signage posted outlawing the weapons. If somebody doesn't want you to bring a weapon into their house or into their business, then once you are notified of it by the sign or notified of the owner, you have to leave, or you will be arrested and your gun will be confiscated, because that is breaching the law, violating the statutes. All right, now the politics and the compromise. This is how this new constitutional carry came into effect in Texas. Permitless carry has long been a fringe issue that the most mainstream elected Texas Republicans fell short of endorsing, which is why it has failed to pass the GOP-controlled legislature for several sessions. Well, actually, as far back as I can remember, they could not get this thing passed. Let's go all the way back to when I was 20 in 1980. That group included Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Even the most Republican, conservative of the conservatives could not get this bill passed. This year, though, so-called constitutional carry was listed as one of the Republican Party of Texas legislative priorities, heading it into the session and ultimately receiving backing from the conservative leadership. That followed years of lobbying from the Second Amendment activists and precedes the electoral threat of pro-gun GOP primary voters in 2022. To get the legislation passed, some changes were made in response to concerns from law enforcement. So, rightfully so, the police said, we are not going to back you, and we're not going to back this bill unless some things are changed about the way you've proposed it. So, initially, the bill banned police officers from questioning a person on the sole basis that they were carrying a pistol. So, and you would think that would be legitimate if somebody's carrying a pistol around, because that's just not a very common thing to do in the open. And particularly, I guess you couldn't get in trouble if you carried your rifle, but the police are going to stop you if you have that too. Lawmakers compromised by amending the bill to now allow officers to question and disarm a person that, quote, at any time the officer reasonably believes it is necessary for the protection of persons, the officer, or another individual. The officer has to return the handgun if the person is deemed not to be a threat and if the person hasn't committed a violation that results in an arrest. Lawmakers have also agreed to enhance the criminal penalties of domestic violence offenders and felons who are caught carrying a handgun. So, just from my own experience with representing defendants who have been charged with illegally carrying a handgun without a license or otherwise. In other words, their gun was confiscated and a charge was made against them on some level by some statute. I have discovered that if the police have determined that they want to talk to you, it is highly likely that they will say that they reasonably believe that it was necessary for the protection of the person or the officer or the individual. So in other words, they can basically stop you anyway because they're going to say that they thought it was for the protection of their people. So just expect that. That would probably keep people that are carrying guns in a flippant manner or a threatening manner from doing so, because it's just not reasonable to believe that you can carry a gun around with it showing and not think that people aren't going to be looking and feel threatened. And in conservative Montgomery County, too. In Houston, not so conservative. I can see where, with all the stuff going on with, with people getting shot by police and the Black Lives Matters movement, and just the litany of things that are going on when people are being shot, really without cause, and the police are being bad actors, you would still want to use your best judgment in how you handle yourselves and when you carry a gun. It's not like we're in the 1800s and this is the Wild West where everyone is carrying a gun. So just be really careful, and I think your best bet would still be to conceal it in a place where it doesn't necessarily have to be in the holster, because they've changed that in the law, or in your purse, but not have it actively out there unless you're going in to stop a robbery, which is still also probably not prudent, because you can get yourself shot that way unless you're in a state of grace and you don't care and you're trying to help people out. Then you're a hero, but you won't be a live one, or you'll be an injured one if they are better shot than you are. Okay, a growing trend. Texas joins 19 other states that have passed constitutional carry laws, though they vary slightly from state to state. Kentucky, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, North Dakota, which doesn't really have much of anything up there. I think they have, what is North Dakota known for? I think oil and gas and a lot of movies recently. Fargo's in North Dakota. It's right there on the border. A lot of people are Canadians and outlaws. I guess they're going back and forth. But not a lot of stuff going on up there in North Dakota. Oklahoma, South Dakota, which has got our, I think it's the Mount Rushmore. And I still think that they need to chisel President Trump's face on there, too. So we have the 5 presidents now. Tennessee, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Vermont is the only state that historically had constitutional carry because the state has never enacted any carry bans. Now, that is interesting. Vermont is always the land of George Washington's home, Mount Vernon. Pretty sure that's in Vermont. I don't know for sure. I might have station manager fact check me. But I think Mount Vernon is in Vermont, and that may be another reason, because he was all about the Constitution, that there was constitutional carry from the very beginning, and that has never changed. It says Texas is now the largest and most populous state to enact constitutional carry. So I'm just looking at those other states. Louisiana is not a constitutional carry. That's kind of interesting. I thought there was a bunch of outlaws over there, all those crazy Cajuns. I'm from Louisiana, so I can speak for them, and I won't be shot by them because we're all cousins if we're from Louisiana. And but Mississippi, I would have expected them to have laws that permit that. So basically, these are the 19 states that have passed constitutional carry laws. Tennessee, you would have expected that with all the country western stuff going on. Wyoming, Jackson Hole, where all of my friends have moved out to lately, and where all the rich people are moving, I guess, to take advantage of the land and develop. I guess to make some money out there while it's in Montana and Wyoming. There's a movie with Kevin Costner on Netflix that talks about how developers are going and making a ton of money out in Montana right now, and destroying our beautiful natural wilderness. It is now becoming all commercial, as the Eagles song goes. You call someplace paradise, kiss it goodbye. Okay, so anyway, Alaska was the first state to rescind its permit requirement, passing constitutional carry in 2003. So that doesn't make any sense. I didn't see Alaska on that list. Alaska was the first state to rescind its permit requirement, passing. Oh, they rescinded their constitutional carry. Okay, so that makes sense. All right, so that is kind of what you need to know. We've got a bunch of comments here talking about how just a bunch of people that were really happy about the law being changed. So I'm not going to go into all of it because there's a bunch of crazy people that are making comments. So that is how the laws have changed about constitutional carry, what you can do and what you can't do, and just to give you a little bit more insight about uh, the new gun law that we talked 2 shows ago. And there's a lot more detail in the show that we had 2 weeks ago. So if you want to go back to irlonestar.com or our YouTube or our Facebook page and watch that one, it gives you a lot more detail. All right. When I was researching the new laws that were passed for the state of Texas, for some reason, this came up, and I thought it was a headline that has nothing to do with the law, but does sort of piggyback what's going on with the federal government and COVID. So it's the effect of the laws and our economy. And I thought that these were some interesting statistics that I would let y'all kind of chew on, so to speak. Now, we've all heard about inflation. The economy seems to be doing pretty well this year. A lot of people aren't working because they got all of these, the COVID stipends from the government. And although our border basically doesn't exist right now, there's a lot of jobs that exist that nobody's taking. And I guess I don't know why exactly, except I don't think that President Biden is managing our economy very well. What it's going to right now, although it's open and doing, the stock market's doing pretty well, and the interest rates are low, and people are buying houses like crazy, and cars are selling like hotcakes. The problem with that is you have an inflation issue, and you've really got to get somebody that really knows what they're doing to monitor the economy like President Trump did. And that's not happening right now. So I'm going to predict, not being an economist, but knowing what historically has happened, that we are going to be hit with a stock market crash, not like the one in 1929, and maybe not as difficult as the one in 2008 that hit us, but our inflation is starting to go out of control. And so here's what I want to tell you about that. The inflation this year, we've all heard about the inflation this year as the price of homes, cars, and food and gas has soared. Okay. But another term is suddenly being used more and more, and it's called shrinkflation. And that's what's basically it's when the people that make products give you a smaller amount of that product for the same price. So it's still inflation, but you're paying the same price. You're just getting less of it, smaller package. So the headlines all say, and this is an article from CNN, that consumer prices jumped 5% in May, and U.S. inflation is the highest it's been in 13 years. So let's go back to about 2014 when Obama was president, all right? Now, so here's some statistics. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics released this this data about year-to-year price hikes last month, okay? Gas prices have gone up since last year, 52%. That's double, all right? Airline tickets are up 24%. Home prices are up 15%. And I can say as a real estate broker that that's not true. In our neighborhood alone, they've doubled. The houses that were selling for $600,000 2 or 3 years ago, so maybe for 1 year, but in 3 years they've doubled, are now selling for 1.5 million to 2.5 million. Same houses with almost no updates. So that's more of that's like a 300 or 400% increase. But anyway, home prices have gone way up because it's a seller's market. You can right now somebody can list their house and people are giving them more than the list price, and they're on the market only for a few days. So it's kind of tough if you priced it right. Hotel rooms are up 7%, clothing's up 3%, and used cars are up a whopping 29%. And I will say this, if you've driven down 45 and looked at the used car lots, you will probably notice that there are very few, not very few, but far less cars. They're not filled. And that's because they're the computer chips that are processed and made for us are made in China, and China is not on great terms with us right now. And I guess the material they need to make it, they don't have, or at least they're saying they don't. So we're not getting the computer chips we need to make the new cars. Consequently, people are buying more used cars, and the price of the new cars on the lot are way up. So you will see that even used cars have gone way up in value. Um, I can only say that I wish that that had been the case when our car got stolen recently, and we were trying to get the fair market value from our insurance company. They were using data from the last year, not data from the last month, and we could not have replaced that car with the same or like value for even half of what they were going to give us because they were saying that their data sheets that they use, and I forgot what they're called, but it's really hard to sue an insurance company for not giving you the value of their car because they all use a similar database. And, having done the research on that because our car was recently stolen, it's really hard to beat that rap. All you can really do is threaten to sue for a different reason. And we didn't have to go that route because we ended up getting our car back because they found it. The person driving it was using it as a getaway car. So apparently they liked our old car, and we're happy that the police, shout out to the Sugar Land police for being able to observe this and getting our car back to us. So kudos to them, and we're extremely happy about that. This is kind of odd. Another piece of data for those that are in the stock market trying to determine what they want to buy and not buy. Lumber prices are finally falling, if that doesn't make any sense. So there's a demand for new houses, but lumber prices are falling. So that's sort of foreshadowing that perhaps we need to be looking at that there's going to be a slowdown coming up here soon in the housing market. Ed Dorsey of Consumer World says consumers are paying more for household staples in ways that don't show up on receipts. Thinner rolls, lighter bags, smaller cans. That's the shrinkflation. Why? Companies are looking to offset the rising labor and material costs without scaring off customers. So the next time you're looking for paper towels, cereal, or bath products, check the size as well as the price. While shrinking products are frustrating, companies say many consumers prefer it to higher prices. And I've discovered, this is weird, my toilet paper is not my normal soft 2 to 3 ply. It is crummy, and they're name brands. So you also want to look at your toilet paper. In our house, we have Hello Kitty, and it's still a thick brand, thanks to my daughter. Thank you very much for buying the best plush Hello Kitty toilet paper. We are enjoying it thoroughly throughout the house right now. Okay, so here here are the federal laws that were recently passed, and I just wanted to say that if you want to see the laws that are passed, you can go to texas.gov, and then you just put in you Google search for new legislation, and when you go there, it brings you up to a site that's really kind of hard to read. It kind of shows you first, there's like all these different little tabs, and you can see the law, they're all listed, the new laws, and they're like 5 line items and a space in the next one. Well, I was going to print that, and then I realized it was 128 pages. And that was like 10 laws per page. And you're not even getting what the law says. You're only getting the line item of the laws where Governor Abbott has actually signed the bill into law, effective September 1st. 128 pages. So that's 10 a page. That's 1,280 new laws. And that's crazy. I had no idea how busy all of our representatives were putting these bills in. But if you want to see what the law is, you can sort it different ways. You can look at what your representative was, if he was the one that sponsored it. You can see what a category is and limit it to a certain, like guns or, whatever the law is that you're looking for. But if you're just like kind of poking around like me, and I don't have time to be doing this, but I was interested in setting up the information we needed for this show, you can actually go to the text of the law and then go to the final, you go to the last rung of, they've got like the Senate passed, the legislature passed, they've got amendments, they've got all these things that are going on. You can read it in Word or PDF. If you go to the last one and you go to text, it's just a 1-page synopsis of the law. If you're more interested, you can go into the different changes that were put in place. And so, for an example, and I'm not sure if I printed this one or not, we have a our one of our representatives is Will Metcalf, and I probably didn't print that one. I don't know why I didn't print that one, but he had a bill. I'll just tell you what it is from memory. He had passed a bill, our sponsored legislation, so that it was a land bill, and we were interested in that because, the Metcalfs kind of have a history here in Conroe I guess his father was the mayor and his mother was one of the Metcalfs that owned. Their family had bought the land for the Girl Scouts, and they also had the land that at one point that they sold for the Boy Scout Camp Strake, which is another interesting history. We'll go over in a different show. That the Strakes ended up with this land, and then they donated. And of course, the Strake history goes back to the oil fields that were discovered in 1901 out here. And Mr. Strake was a Catholic, and he learned that his well came in while he was at Mass, and he said, no, God is more important than oil, and on and on. But it's really interesting. But anyway, the Metcalfs have a history. Will Metcalf, in continuing that tradition, had sponsored a bill that allowed churches to get not just a 6-year tax benefit for land that was contiguous to their church land to further develop. Now your land that you own, if you're a church, a nonprofit for religion, if you have land that's contiguous to your church land, you have up to 10 years to develop it and still get a tax break as church land. So it's not just the land the church is on that gets the tax break, but it's the contiguous land that you also own. And he increased that from 6 years to 10 years. Well, that's a really small thing, but it was one of the 1,280 laws that Governor Abbott signed into place. And it was small, but you'd never know about that unless it was something that affected you. But you might want to know if you're a real estate broker or if you were considering starting a church, which it actually is not that difficult to do in Texas, so you could have the nonprofit write-off and tax breaks for that. But that's a different show if you want to do that. Okay, so here are the federal laws in a nutshell. We're just going to kind of go over some things that you may need to know that affect you. Okay, so 2020 saw massive protest over police brutality, as you know. And this is an article from CNN, which I don't normally watch, but they always have such really good synopsis of the law. And I don't think that they would lie about this. I think they may have kind of crunched the law on some other stuff, but here, not on these major reforms. There was massive protests over police brutality, economic insecurity brought on by the coronavirus, and extreme weather events that again signal the gravity of the climate crisis, if you buy into that, which I don't. And across the country, state legislatures and local jurisdictions responded to those and other issues with new laws and regulations on the state level. But we're going to talk about the federal legislation today. So, from police reform to automatic college savings accounts, here are some of the new rules taking effect that were enacted by the federal government. Police reform. As people took to the street to demand an end to the violence against black people at the hands of law enforcement, communities attempted to address some of the underlying challenges in a number of ways. And then they go on to talk about Connecticut and Missouri and some other laws, but I guess that's just going to be state laws. Texas didn't do that, so I'm going to forego that. I don't care about what people did with regard to law and police reform in states that do not affect us directly. Okay, airport security. This is important. Your old driver's license might not be enough to get you through airport security next time you fly. A security law that was passed after the 9/11 attacks is finally set to go into effect in October of 2021, 10 years later, after being delayed due to the coronavirus pandemic an additional year. Starting October 1st, travelers will need a real, it's called REAL capitalized ID, compliant driver's license, a U.S. passport, U.S. military ID, or other acceptable identification to board a commercial aircraft in the U.S. A real, capital REL ID, is marked by a star on the top of the card. It was born out of the Federal Real ID Act, which established minimum security standards for the issuance of state licenses and their production. Under that act, federal agencies are prohibited from accepting licenses from states not meeting those minimum standards or certain activities. So you got to have a star on it, basically. The Department of Homeland Security I guess if there even still exists, based on all the stuff that we've been hearing about lately on the border and what have you, extended the deadline for states to comply with Real ID requirements last year so that leaders could focus their efforts on the coronavirus pandemic. All right. So, Real ID is now in effect, and your driver's license has not been renewed recently. You may not be able to use just that, so bring your passport just in case. Now, employment. Many low wage workers around the country will see a boost to their paychecks this year. 20 states raised the minimum rates in 2021, some by just pennies, others by $1 or more. Some of the increases were part of the previously scheduled efforts to adjust the cost of living, while others were aimed at moving toward goals like $15 an hour minimum wage pay. This talks about California, New Mexico, Minnesota. I don't care about them, so we're not going to talk about it. We have to go to the state legislation, which I really should be talking about that because it's going to tell which ones really affect us. So just to hit on higher education, this talks about in Illinois, some environmental bans. I don't care about any of that. Good. We get to move on to Texas, which is because the federal laws, you've got these state and federal laws sometimes bat heads. They are lock horns. And if the law in the Constitution is not deemed to be a federal law, then it is a state law. And a lot of the federal government tries to preempt that by passing these laws, like the things that you hear about that go to the Supreme Court, the abortion laws, I'm just trying to think of all the different laws. Particularly, that's the first one that came to mind because I think that we've tried to curtail that. The gun laws, various laws that when the federal government tries to preempt state laws when it's a state law issue, then you have problems. And so state laws will always trump federal laws unless the Constitution specifically doesn't allow them. Because if the Constitution doesn't allow it, then you can take it up in federal court, and it may end up in the Supreme Court to see which law will prevail. All right. So here are the new laws signed by Governor Abbott after the 2021 legislative session. All right. And this, although this article was printed in 2021 in June, it was the ones that are going to be effective on September 1st, and those haven't changed. I do want to add before I get to those laws, just to change gears just a little bit, that if you go to Governor Abbott's page, opposite, which I just love Governor Abbott, he's such a great guy. If you go to his page, you can see almost day by day when he has press releases what he's signing. And so since last week, I just want to show you some of the things that have been going on in his press releases, and he does these week by week, so they go back exactly 1 week from today. On June 29th, the press release says First Lady Cecilia Abbott delivers an address at Austin Diocesan Council of Catholic Women's, their 71st annual convention. And I wish that I had been there for that because I think that that's, of course, I'm Catholic, and I think that the First Lady of our state is amazing, and I bet she gave an amazing speech. First Lady Cecilia Abbott, on that date, delivered a keynote address to the Council of Catholic Women, celebrating the members' contributions to their communities, and they actually do a lot. What comes to mind first and foremost in my legal profession is that Catholic Charities really does handle and does a phenomenal job with adoptions, with kids that need to be placed in, more difficult kids too, in foster care, whose parents are on drugs or they've died or they've been abandoned. Catholic Charities steps up to the plate and makes sure that they're placed with proper foster families and eventually they try to get them adopted by the proper families that can handle the many issues that they face with regard to maybe they were born with drug problems because their mother was on drugs or what have you. But Catholic Charities, great thing. And Cecilia Abbott's supporting them, and that's good for her too, and all of us. On June 30th, Governor Abbott hosted the 45th President Donald J. Trump for border security briefing, the border wall tour in the Rio Grande Valley. On July 1st, Governor Abbott renewed the disaster declaration concerning the border security. And remember, when you've got a disaster declaration, there's benefits from the state and from the federal government that kick in, that help you if you were affected by that disaster. On July 1st, Governor Abbott renewed the COVID 19 disaster declaration of July 1st, 2020. So you can still get some of the benefits and the things that will help you that you were experiencing where you may have been affected by COVID. Governor Abbott on July 1st also urged landowners affected by the border crisis to submit self-reporting damage survey. And that's critical for people that, live here in Montgomery County that own land. And I know several ranches and what have you over on the border. You can self-report the damage survey to Governor Abbott that you can use that will help you to get a damage payment reimbursements so you can have recompense for that. On July 6th, which is today, Governor Abbott appointed Bill Avera to the Texas School Safety Center Board his term will expire February 1st, 2022. So obviously that must be an elected position where somebody left. And then also today, Governor Abbott announced his Texas Health and Human Services Commission extension of emergency supplemental nutrition assistance program benefits for the month of July as the state continues to respond to COVID-19 pandemic. So if the benefits for people that are on food stamps basically run out, or if you have a child who's in school that was getting benefits from school that he or she wasn't getting because of the pandemic, then you can apply and those benefits will still be in place for you for the month of July. All right, so here are the new laws that were in place that were signed into law that will be effective September 1st. After a controversial and often contentious legislative session, Texans will soon see several new laws that take effect. These are just the highlighted ones out of the 1,280 that Governor Abbott signed into place, the minutiae, the amendments, and what have you. One of the biggest stories to come out of the Republican-controlled 87th legislature was the bill that didn't make it into law. After a dramatic last-minute walkout by House Democrats on May 31st, Senate Bill 7 was dead in the water. Senate Bill 7, as you may or may not know, was a Republican GOP priority that would have created new limitations on early voting hours, increased voting by mail restrictions, and curbed local options like drive-through voting. So this is in direct, response to our very liberal neighbor, Harris County, and Houston having drive-through voting, letting people vote without the proper IDs. Really what made it so that although Trump won the presidential election in Texas, it made it so that it will be more difficult in the future if we don't curb some of the federal voting shenanigans that are going on, like allowing people to vote without an ID, which just seems absolutely absurd. But anyway, Governor Abbott says that he will call a special session on the election and bail reform bills to try again, so stay tuned. So just because they lost on this one doesn't mean that it won't come again. He's determined to make it so that we can at least be able to voting is such an important right for us. Why would we let somebody that wasn't a citizen vote or didn't have the authority to vote if their voting rights have been taken away from them, which sometimes they are, if you've broken certain laws and what have you, or at the very least so that you can't vote twice, so you don't have a phony ID. I mean, it just seems silly that they're just going to let anybody vote, a 2-year-old or a dead person or whatever. Anyway, meanwhile, these are the major bills already signed by Governor Abbott. Most of them will take effect September 1st. All right. We've already talked about constitutional carry. The brief rephrasing of it. It eliminates the requirement for Texas residents to obtain a license to carry handguns if they are not prohibited by state or federal law from possessing a gun. The law seals a big win for the conservative activists, but majority of the Texas voters don't think permitless carry should be allowed, according to an April University of Texas study. And station manager Dick told me I have 5 minutes, was exactly the amount of time that I need because I've got just a few laws that we're going to talk about. Roe versus Wade trigger law. The Republican-led legislature passed a bill to outlaw abortions in Texas if the U.S. Supreme Court reverses Roe versus Wade in the 1973 case that legalized abortion. It's called the Trigger Law, House Bill 1280. This happens to be the number of laws that were signed into effect by Governor Abbott, effective September 1st. House Bill 1280 would take effect 30 days after the Supreme Court overturned the Roe decision or after the court ruling or constitutional amendment gave states the authority to prohibit abortions. So this is a trigger law because the way it's said, just to explain it a little bit further if that's not perfectly clear, as clear as mud, that we will, the state of Texas will outlaw abortions only if Roe versus Wade is overturned by the Supreme Court. And I don't know if it's not before the Supreme Court right now. It might be, but not to worry. If it hasn't been overturned, you won't be hearing about this. Okay, the next law is churches can't be closed during disasters. This was a really big hot topic for the Catholic Church because, the pandemic was saying you only have 25% capacity when it could be open. They really limited our rules. They limited it on army bases, and you couldn't go practice your religion and go to mass, and you couldn't even get your last rites by priests. I mean, it was really limited, and for Catholics, that's huge. It was just really, really a bad thing. And so, while the Catholic churches did open up to the extent that they could, there's now a law saying that churches can't be closed during disasters. The required shutdown of places of worship during COVID pandemic didn't sit well with many Texas lawmakers who said it crossed the line, which it did. House Bill 1239 banned state agencies and officials from issuing orders that, quote, close or have the effect of closing places of worship in the state. All right, so national anthem. The so-called Star-Spangled Banner Protection Act is a conservative-backed bill that requires any professional sports team with contracts with the state of Texas to play the national anthem before the start of every game. Opponents question the constitutionality of the law that they said ties the funding to free speech. But in Texas right now, you got to have your national anthem, and that's going to be effective September 1st. I don't think it's been tested yet, but I expect that we're going to have some people that are going to follow suit against it or something. But for right now, expect your national anthem. I think we do that most of the time anyway. Maybe not basketball games. I think they came around too. Critical race theory. The controversial bill controls how Texas teachers can talk about current events and America's history of racism in the classroom. Texas is one of a handful of states across the country that have passed such legislation which aims to ban the teaching of the critical race theory in kindergarten through 12th grade public school classrooms. Critical race theory is an academic term that studies how race and racism have impacted social and local structures in the United States. There's an article about this if you want to go to our website when the show is over. It's called, and we'll put a link to it, Texas Critical Race Theory Bill Limiting Teaching of Current Events Signed into Law. So they just can't talk about it. Okay, here's the next one. This is a really important one for me. Broadband internet access. In Texas, experts say that more than 9 million people don't have broadband internet connection. That's, hint, hint, Red Oak Ranch. We had such bad interconnection, and we were right outside of Conroe. It was crazy. But our Spectrum did come out and put a new tap in, and now we have internet. So thank you for listening to our many, many complaints and actually coming out there and fixing it for us at no cost. We appreciate it so much. Anyway, either they don't have it because the infrastructure doesn't reach their homes or because they aren't subscribed to a service. The law creates the law creates the creation of a state broadband development office, which will award grants, low-level loans, and other incentives to build out broadband access. So there's no excuse now for Spectrum or Consolidated or whoever you have your internet through, and you're just right outside of getting really good reception for them to go get a grant and take care of that for you. And I guess we had enough complaints in our legislature that my amazing conservative Republican representative have taken care of that for us. It was signed on July 8th. Now, the ERCOT reform bill is really important to people that lost their electricity during the freeze and are losing it during the summer right now. Governor Greg Abbott signed 2 bills aimed at preventing another power grid failure, a promise he made after February's deadly winter storm. Senate Bill 2 changes the structure of the board for the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, the nonprofit that operates Texas electrical grid, so politicians appoint the majority of the members. That's weird. So politicians appoint the majority of the members? Why would we want that? Oh, well, maybe there's something good about that. Senate, I thought we were trying to take their authority away and put it back to the people. Senate Bill 3 requires critical power generators to update their infrastructure to be resistant to extreme temperatures. The bill also creates a statewide power outage alert system. After ERCOT asked Texans to conserve power during the recent heat wave, KHOU 11 energy expert Ed Hire says the bills are vague, so those will be updated. Now the next section is vaccine passports are banned. The law bans any business operating in Texas for requiring so-called vaccine passports or any vaccine information. A vaccine passport is essentially a way for people to quickly prove that they have been vaccinated for COVID-19. Texas is 100% open without restrictions or limitations or requirement, Governor Abbott has said in his latest legislative press release. So you don't need a vaccine passport to enter a property or to do anything. I mean, it's just Texas businesses can't requirement for you to go in. The heartbeat bill is very important. Texas now has one of the strictest abortion laws in the nation with the heartbeat bill. It prohibits abortions in Texas as early as 6 weeks before some women even know they're pregnant and opens the door for almost any private citizen to sue abortion providers and others. The signing of the bill opens a new frontier in the battle over abortion restrictions as a first of its kind legal provisions intended to make the new law harder to block. They are poised to be tested in the courts. Abortion rights advocates have promised to challenge the new law. You can also, this is the last one, very quickly, I have to wind it up, alcohol to go. The bipartisan bill allows restaurants to sell booze with pickup and delivery orders, extending Abbott's executive order on alcohol to go that occurred during the pandemic. The waiver was a part of an effort to keep bars and restaurants afloat as they were closed at reduced capacity. So now you can sell alcohol to go all the time. They have extended it to an ongoing thing since I've been told to an ongoing law. I've been told by Station Manager Dick that we have to wind up. You can go to our website if you want to hear any of this. You go to Governor Abbott's website and Texas.gov if you want to read the detail of any of these laws. Are the ones that we didn't mention. I'm Tony Collins, and remember, the most important thing to do is to serve God by serving others. We'll see you next week.